Hi, welcome to Shared Lunch, brought to you by Sharesies. At Sharesies, we're on a mission to create financial empowerment for everyone, and that's why these conversations are so important. It's a chance to peek behind the curtain and learn more about what's going on in the world of wealth. I'm Sonia Williams, co-founder and co-CEO at Sharesies, and in today's episode of Shared Lunch, we're in North Sydney, speaking to the CEO of one of Australia and New Zealand's largest essential infrastructure companies, Ventia. Dean Banks is the Managing Director and Group CEO of a company that many of us rely on to keep the water flowing through our taps, the lights on, and other vital infrastructure in our community.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording. We acknowledge the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land, water and sky from where we're filming today, and pay respects to elders past and present.
So hi Dean, welcome to the show.
Hello Sonia.
So let's start with the basics. What is Ventia and what do you do?
So Ventia is an essential services company that really manages the assets that you utilise to go through your daily lives. So if you think about operations, maintenance and service, we would be looking after the water when you switch on a tap in the morning. We would be monitoring the highway and recovering if you broke down on the highway or in a tunnel. We'd be at the school doing facilities management or the hospital, all the way through until when you come home and you start to use different media. We'd be behind the telecommunications that allow you to asset that particular information.
Very broad, isn't it?
I think that's one of the advantages of the business, actually. The portfolio perspective of it means that we're not driven by one capability and gives us great agility and flexibility as well.
You're from England, a Liverpool fan. How did you end up where you are now, leading one of Australia's top 200 ASX listed companies?
It can be a long story or a short story about how I got here, but essentially quite a few years ago, I got offered a job as a CEO in Australia. So it was, as I would describe it, an itch to scratch. And then I was in lockdown in COVID in the UK and got a call about this opportunity. And I'll be candid, I live in a very small village in the UK. There was about 6 houses within a 5-mile radius. So getting the opportunity to talk to anybody was really welcome. So started the conversations about Ventia, really compelling story, value proposition sold to me. And I think, look, opportunity to come and live here in Australia, great life experience, but professionally as well to become Group CEO of a business that had just grown substantially, was in private equity, but with plans to move into the listed environment. It's quite a unique set of circumstances.
So let's talk about Ventia and results. What are some of the key takeaways from your most recent financial update?
Look, I think the great thing about Ventia is we're only really a business that has been known since listing in many ways, back to still, a relatively unknown brand. Our business had been built up by acquisitions of various companies, but 5 years ago when I did arrive, we decided to reset the brand. So everything now is called Ventia rather than the previous trade names that they had. And over the last 4 years, we've really built up a track record of reliability and trust in doing what we say we'll do. So I think if you look at our last set of results, I think broadly we did what we said we would do. But probably the most exciting thing in there is that our work in hand, which obviously gives us longevity of pipeline and work moving forward, has grown significantly, largely off the back of telecommunications contract awards, which historically have been 18 months in tenure, so quite short. But the last two that we've won with both Telstra and NBN have been 5 years. So that gives both our employees, stability and security in terms of employment, but also gives our investors great stability around the performance of the business.
What was behind the merging of the brands under the one?
I'm a major believer in simplification and standardisation. So I think that it's really important that hopefully we can get everybody to be proud and passionate about a brand. When you fragment it, it's very, very difficult. So you'll notice I'm wearing a Ventia badge. A lot of our people you'll see in Ventia branded clothing or wearing Ventia badges. And lots of people ask often, what is the badge? Which hopefully gives our people an opportunity to talk with pride and passion about the organisation. So helping to get people to really know what Ventia is and what Ventia is about. So there might be some concessions sometimes in terms of thinking about your own project, your own geography, and thinking about the greater good of the organisation and what are the big goals for the organisation. That's quite hard culturally as well to drive. If you've been an organisation built up of various different silos, getting everybody to think at a group level is a real challenge. Now, I'm not saying we're anywhere near the end of that journey, but it's certainly a journey that we're on.
You don't work directly with retail customers. Can you tell us some of the customers you do support and how do you stand out from your competitors?
So we're largely a business that is business to government, business to business, but of course we do touch the end customer, often though in the brand name of one of our clients. If you look across the four sectors, so if you looked at telecommunications, all the big telco carriers, so for us, you'd be looking at Telstra, Optus, TPG, etc. would work with them. If you move into our infrastructure services business, sort of more of the industrials, so Chevron, BlueScope, etc. And then in transport, Transurban, probably for major highways and tunnels. And then finally in defence and social infrastructure, largely government clients, but also we work with private customers like Healthscope as an example.
You've kind of grouped across the four just then, but do you want to tell us a bit more about the sectors and the breakdowns?
Yeah, so I think back to great portfolio business, really cover the geography of Australia and New Zealand. About 40% of our work is in where the population live, but then about 40% is in regional and remote areas as well. And that's really critical to our community service. In terms of capabilities, defence and social infrastructure largely is facilities management, and that can be, as we would call it, soft and hard, so cleaning and catering on a soft side, on a hard side, mechanical and electrical support of assets. If I take defence though, we do a lot of services for clients, and I think that's really important. So for defence, we'll do cleaning, catering, we'll do logistics management, we'll maintain assets for them like fire trucks, but also their own assets as well. The other big thing for our business is we try to cross-sell our capability. So also for defence, we'll do things like environmental activity to remove PFAS where there's contaminated ground. We'll do telecommunications to put mesh networks in there so military personnel can be connected, because when they come up for renewal, if we're providing 6 or 7 services, it's hard to replace all of those. And most of our competitors often do 1 or 2 of our capabilities or work in 1 or 2 of the geographies. So actually one of our key differentiators is that ability to do multiple services for our customers.
What is the kind of revenue breakdown across the different sectors?
Defence social infrastructure, which I've just talked about, is our biggest sector. Infrastructure services, slightly different sector in that it's really 3 component parts. So as we would call it, resource and industrial, which is doing mechanical and electrical engineering on major infrastructure assets, also do rigs and wells, so coal seam gas. We do water and water utilities, operations and management. Telecommunications, obviously we do telecommunications, but we also work in adjacencies, using that expert capability to do things for defence, as I talked about earlier, but also for things in space. So we're in WA currently, in the middle of the desert there, putting up 300 telescopes so we can go back to space and start to look at, what created the world. I can't really explain exactly how it works, but they're going to go back and take pictures of the past and start to understand how the universe come to be. And then finally, our smallest sector is transport, where we really work in a niche, maintaining and operating major highways and tunnels across the major cities here in Australia and New Zealand. In terms of revenue, back to your question, defence social infrastructure is the biggest. Telco and IS then are the next, and transport's a smaller niche. But I think the great thing about being in a portfolio is, of course, some will have growth spurts at different times. So that sort of balances off the group risk really, really nicely.
Yeah, like if we hone in on, the rise in digital connectivity and how that's really growing at the moment, and how that translates into supporting the telco networks. I mean, how significant can that be for Australia?
Look, I think it's massive. I will say on some things, Australia is really ahead, and then on other things we're a long way behind. But I think that promotes opportunity for us. And the great thing about our business is that old assets are good for us because they need more operations and maintenance. And new assets are fantastic for us because a new asset to operate and maintain. Since COVID, everybody wants to be connected everywhere. We need 5G in place. We need fixed fibre in place. And then, of course, there's even more security requirements. And so one of the big risks for a business like ours is cyber, but that's also an opportunity because we're now building closed networks, private networks for people. And our thirst for data, the growth of technology is going to be a growth engine for our business. But the big thing about it as well is there's going to be power required to support that. And of course, we do the power part of it as well. So actually, we can get multiple growth engines from the tailwinds that we've got behind us currently.
Yeah, so let's hone in on energy or power, because obviously with all the rise in AI and all the processing needed, we need more energy. So how does this affect Ventia's work, and how are you thinking about that?
I would say our biggest market opportunities in the energy space. If you look at our business today, we do about $6 billion of revenue. We say the market size is $80 billion, growing at about 5% a year. So by 2029, it's going to be over $100 billion market opportunity for us. Energy is probably about 40% of that. So the first piece of it is really about stabilising supply of energy. And then the second piece is really about new energy. We have the skills to support all of that, but we're quite a small player in the market today. I will say one of the problems with renewable energy, some of those assets are not built yet. And for us, that means there's a bit of a snowball effect of opportunities being pushed out but continuing to grow. I can't see anything but growth in that space for our organisation. One of the challenges for businesses in that space is obviously, have you got the capabilities to support it? Because if the opportunity is growing, are the resources available? So for us, we spend a lot of time looking at making sure we can get the resources to support. I'm really proud that today our attrition with the people that are in the business is the lowest it's been during my tenure. And also the number of applications for roles in Ventia is higher than it's ever been, which I think is back to the brand starting to get some recognition, good reputation, and people seeing it as a really good place to work. So hopefully we can continue to attract the best and brightest.
How do you think about what the biggest opportunities are and the biggest challenges for Ventia right now?
I'll start with challenges. First of all, when you've got 35,000 workforce, health and safety is a key consideration. Safety is our licence to operate, so it is really important that we look after the safety of our people and also their well-being. Today, there's a lot more consideration around the well-being of our people, and we've got people from various different backgrounds and upbringings, but they mix really well in our organisation. Second big risk is cyber, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, we do 75% of our revenue for government. Clearly, there are a lot of attacks to try and get access to data that government hold. Now, the first protection for a business like ours is don't hold the data. So we only hold things we need to hold, and then we put the appropriate protections in place. On the opportunity side, I really see four big opportunities. So we've discussed energy. Energy is, I think, fundamental to our future success story. The three others would be digital infrastructure, water, and fourthly, defence. There's additional commitment to expenditure from the Australian Defence Force as a percentage of GDP, but we're also probably seeing with the geopolitical situation more international interest as well in Australia. And we support both the Australian Defence Force and military personnel that come to these shores.
You mentioned 35,000 employees, and you mentioned health and safety with a team that size and in the industries that you're in. How do you measure that and make sure it's improving over time?
It's hard, and of course you've got to have great trust in the managers and supervisors you've got out there, making sure people work to the safe practices and policies that we've got. Now you need to wrap some verification around that as well. Trust only takes you so far, but there's a lot of work on education. So when people join the business, whether they are a full-time employee or a subcontractor, they're treated as part of the family and get the same education. So again, back to that simplification and standardisation, we try and hold the same safety standards for everybody and make sure we're looking after the safety and well-being of everybody in Ventia.
And so you touched on earlier coming into the role and really thinking of the strategy of the business. And that's a big part of the success story to date. What is it? What is the corporate strategy? And how is that driving the growth and performance for the business?
I think this business has done great things in the past to create the platform that we've got today. And I think that's really, really important. One of the things I would say that when I arrived was I felt that in a private equity world, there was probably quite a lot of focus on the financial elements of performance of the business. And I would say a little bit of hierarchical management, but also the business was driven very much with a head. It thought very logically. I felt there was probably a little bit of heart missing from the organisation. Now, you need both. So I'm not in any way saying that everything can be about heart, and particularly as a publicly listed business, there's an expectation on you for delivery. But I think we've really balanced culturally head and heart. And therefore, our strategy is really about behaviours. But our aim is to try and get everybody pointed in the same direction. So our strategy is to redefine service excellence and be known as the company that brings celebrity services, I would call it, to all of our clients. And my point is, well, your customers are paying your salaries, etc., etc. So you should treat them like celebrities. So we try and, if you like, differentiate ourselves by that celebrity service across the business. And of course, you can also create a bit of competition there about talking about celebrity service and celebrating it, and then keep raising the bar in terms of performance. So the first pillar of redefining service excellence is customer focus. The second pillar is innovation. And I look at innovation in two ways. So firstly, we should know the assets that we look after better than our customers, which means we are the best informed people and can make the best decisions about maintaining those assets. Even down to simple things because of our scale, that we've got a library of information. So if you're running a hospital and you ask us to come and look at doing the facilities maintenance, we might look at the performance and the way you've been managing it and say, look, we noticed that on the pumps, you've been changing the filters every 3 months. We look after 120 other hospitals, and we've proven there's no deterioration if you change the filters every 4 months. We'd have that knowledge because of our scale, whereas they wouldn't have that. And of course, that's a 25% cost saving straight away. So we can bring that sort of data to the place. And then the second point of innovation is, of course, bringing smart technology. So, robots, AI, all of those sort of things that, we're expected to deliver and we're expected to find. And that's important then back to that point of being curious. I really try and tell our people they should always be looking for best practice and then bringing it into the business. The first part of that is we've probably got about 200 live projects on the ground today. So we shouldn't really, in my view, have deviation between the best and the worst. The tolerance should be really small, whereas I find the tolerance is too big for me at the minute. So the first thing is to try and get everybody to the best standard we've got internally and then elevate it through continuous improvement to best practice across the globe. And then the third tenet of our strategy is around sustainability. So we serve community. A lot of the people that work for us live in those communities, so they know the people personally. So our legacy is to try and leave the community better when we leave than when we arrived. And I think that's really, really important because we have very long tenure contracts. Our average contract tenure is 7 years, so we tend to be there a long time. And our renewal rate on contracts is 90%. So the likelihood is we're going to be there for decades. So it is really important that we do the right thing. And I think that we've got a really high moral compass. People are at the heart of everything we do, and safety is our number one brand promise.
And so talking on the innovation layer, the second one, how are you thinking about AI in your business?
We've introduced Copilot. So for a lot of the management team, they're probably producing better emails than they ever did before. And they're producing documents with data in they probably knew nothing about before. And that does make a difference. Of course, then you want to try and get more specific and tangible benefits into the organisation. So we have a large call centre supporting a lot of our customers. And in the call centre now, we've got AI running there that'll know the person on the call, will know the previous calls they've made, will show us other people who've rang in with similar topic. So we can be a lot better educated in our answer to an individual when they call in. And if you think about telecommunications, a lot of our responses are about technical fixes to reactive problems in the field. Again, if we can have all that data, we can have real insights into the asset and explain to them very simply how we can fix it. We're using it across a plethora of other things, but I think we're still educating our people around it. We're actually just signed up to a partnership with Melbourne Business School to go and do some education for our next 100 managers. And so we try and make sure we spread best practice, as I said, across our organisation. We've just introduced something called VenSpark. VenSpark is a system that's built with AI embedded, where you can put employee suggestion scheme in, and then we can start to capture understanding around our business about how that works, and also then generically spread best practice across the organisation. And that's available to our people. They can see it. It's a collaborative tool, but it's a very transparent tool as well.
And how about robotics?
A lot of robotics in many tenures are not right for us. Where we've seen particular advantages is particularly in land management, so simple things like cutting grass. The traditional sort of diesel lawnmower is not there anymore. You'll probably see a robotic, electronic lawnmower. The great advantage with that is less noise. On the other side of that, you look at things like cleaning for schools. A lot of the robotics there we won't use, and one of the reasons is that, one, people like people-to-people connectivity. But if you think of a school sports hall, often people leave things out, and one of the things our cleaners do first is remove the things and put them to the edges, whereas a robot just cleans around them. With future iterations, that may change. And then, of course, with robotics, we're using things like agents. It's very much, we look for new technology, but also we really, really are proud that we are a people business. And I think the connection with people is really important. And I don't think anything will lose over the long term in our organisation.
I like to think of it as a human competitive advantage. You know, like what's the competitive advantage of being human and bringing that into business?
As I said, robots can help us in many ways, but I think the biggest thing for me at this point in time is data, to make better informed decisions, do things more productively, but largely people still doing that. And of course, people asking the right questions as well.
And so looking ahead, what are your biggest priorities for Ventia in the next 3 to 5 years?
The big thing for me is to try and create a burning ambition in the organisation. And you can only do that if people buy into what you're doing today, but also are very passionate about improving the performance of the business. So improving every day is fundamental to our future success. A lot of our customers, they're challenged today with the economy, and they want to do things at the lowest possible cost moving forward. It is about working collaboratively in a strategic partnership to find smarter ways of doing things. So often with some entities, they'll say to us, we want you to provide all the services, but we can't necessarily pay you the inflationary in cost year on year. So we need you to find smart ways of driving that. Simple things can make a big difference in this organisation. So it really is about daily incremental gains, getting everybody pointed in the same direction. And I also believe that I'm really passionate, I'm really proud and privileged to be the CEO of this organisation, but I get to represent all the people and what they do. So sharing their stories of success, asking them to be passionate about the brand and talking passionately about the brand is infectious. And I think it makes a real difference.
And so if you wanted to leave one message with investors, what would it be?
Every investor looks at their investment in different ways. But I think with Ventia, what you've got is a business that has already built up a reputation for delivering on what it will say it will do, almost to the degree of being and delivering boring reliability. And I think when you look at everything that's going on in the world today, boring reliability is actually quite a good selling point. And the great thing is I'm really boring, so I promise you that we will bring boring reliability to the organisation. I think a lot of time in businesses when they are successful, they start to find that's not exciting. So they start to look for things that bring more excitement to the organisation. I really believe in staying within our circles of trust where we perform really well. And I go back to there's lots of headroom for us to grow. So we can really focus on quality of growth rather than quantity of growth. And I think that is, in today's world, a very, very good value proposition for investors looking to get that annuity style performance out of their portfolio.
To wrap up, do you have a favourite piece of, leadership wisdom that has really stuck with you?
Look, the biggest thing for me is forever learning. Well, I love to learn from people. We as a business bring lots of people in from different backgrounds and different perspectives to share their stories. And I think that's really, really important because we want to educate, we want to share. So for me, that forever learning piece. And remember, as a business, that we want to see all of the people in our organisation grow and develop and become the best version of themselves. And we want them to talk fondly about Ventia. But I think in terms of being successful, the person that cares the most about their careers is them. And therefore, we just say to them, grasp every opportunity that comes. And you never make a bad decision. You know, every decision is a learning decision. Go with it and make it successful. And hopefully we can help educate them and experience them such that the decisions are really good decisions.
So we know investing in infrastructure is key for economies to thrive. Is there enough happening at a national level or why that's so important?
When you look at infrastructure investment, there are lots of examples that data shows it helps the economy to grow. As an organisation ourselves, we measure social value. So e.g., every dollar you spend with Ventia, how much gets returned and reinvested in the local community. And if you look at tailwinds in the country, things are quite simple in terms of legislation, regulation, population growth. I mean, the assets we serve, roads, hospitals, schools, they're going to need investment. And of course, the investment into those assets means jobs, and then it becomes a circular economy. So from our perspective, we are advocates of investment. But I would also say, as I said earlier, the great thing about our business and the boringness of our business is that if we don't invest as a country, the old assets, if the population growth will be used more, need more maintenance. And if new assets come online, that's new opportunity for us to drive revenue for the country.
Thanks for joining us, Dean. And thanks everyone for tuning in. You can watch Shared Lunch on YouTube or follow along on your favourite podcast app. Leave us a rating or a comment about what you'd like to hear about next.